Hi, I'm Ed Dare. I'm going to be your host for the next hour, showing you my process and personal techniques for installing everything from the lath installation to the final colored stuccoed finish. Whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer, it will be an enjoyable experience learning how everything comes together. Some of the tips and tricks I show you in this video will even benefit the most seasoned professional. I'm going to base my training on the 3-coat conventional system. The process used in this video for installing the lath and stucco on a room addition are also used on newly framed houses, whether it's a 1-story or a 2-story dwelling, or even a commercial building. We'll take you through a step-by-step process, starting with the lathing process, then on to Portland cement, scratch and brown coats, and finally the color coat. The materials I use in this training course are the same materials that have been used for decades and are still widely used today. Also, some of the tools I use in this video are tools that I still use on a daily basis. When purchasing lath material, there are some things you need to keep in mind before you invest in supplies needed to complete your project. First and foremost, always check with your local building department for the required specification design for the region you're located in. Secondly, you'll want to purchase the correct amount of building material to complete your project. Measure each wall individually. Take a linear footage measurement and times that by the height of the wall up to the top plate. That will give you a square footage portion of the wall. On gable walls, the best way to achieve a proper measurement here is to take the length of the wall by the height of the gable peak and divide that by 2. Most all stucco contractors measure by the square yard, which is 9 square feet. So divide the total square footage by 9, and that will give you the amount of square yards. Materials you will need for the lath process are as follows. Weep screed. Installing weep screed on any new construction, whether it's on a room addition or a newly constructed house, is a code requirement. It became mandatory in the early 70s by the Federal Housing Association. In the 50s and 60s, and even earlier before it became a requirement, the stucco system terminated into the soil. Since a stucco system is very porous, it has a tendency to wick moisture from the soil, and in a short amount of time, the stucco would blister and delaminate. If the stucco had been painted, the problem was accelerated because the paint would not allow the stucco system to breathe and allow the moisture to evaporate through the stucco. In this illustration, let's start with a slab, bottom plate and wall studs, and then the lath and stucco system. Unfortunately, on most stucco homes, the owner, needing to keep their lawn green, will inadvertently spray the stucco wall as well, not knowing this can eventually destroy the stucco system. Since the stucco is porous and absorbs water, the system becomes saturated with moisture. Fortunately, since the stucco system is so porous, this has a reversible effect and begins to evaporate back out through the wall. But if the wall does not fully evaporate the moisture before the next cycle of spraying begins, this can also destroy the stucco. When the ground level is above the weep screed, the moisture doesn't necessarily need to come from the sprinklers to delaminate the stucco system. As you can see in this illustration, the moisture travels up the wall and a small percentage is allowed to escape through the wall and evaporate. If paint is applied on the exterior of the stucco wall, the moisture still travels up the wall but has no means for escape. Eventually, the moisture finds a weak area of the stucco begins to degrade and push out on the painted area, and in most cases breaks through the paint. If this continues, this can cause the lath paper to degrade, as well as causing moisture to infiltrate into the stud cavity and eventually causing mold issues. In this illustration, we have a retaining wall. Moisture not only comes up from the ground, but if the back side of the block wall is not sealed correctly, moisture can travel through the block and then through the stucco. As before, if paint is applied on the exterior of the stucco wall, moisture still travels through the wall but has no means for escape. Eventually, the moisture finds a weak area of the stucco begins to degrade and push out on the painted area, and in most cases breaks through the paint. It'd be like taking a wet sponge, putting it in a plastic baggie, zipping it up, and expecting it to dry. It just won't happen. The weep screed eliminates the problem of wicking moisture from the soil because it holds the stucco up off the ground. The required distance weep screed should be placed is 4 inch above soil and 2 inch above the slab. In this case, the concrete finishers poured the slab above the weep screed line and did not allow for the 4 inch distance. This can cause a moisture-related issue. The weep screed comes in 10-foot lengths, which makes it easy to estimate how much to purchase. The weep screed has half-inch weep holes to allow moisture to leach down through the stucco system and out through these holes. But the main function of the holes is as a reinforcement for the stucco because it gives the stucco something to hang on to. But since the stucco is porous, the holes still act as weep holes. The next thing you'll need is line wire. Line wire comes in a roll known as a stone of wire. It's a 17 gauge wire that is used as backing behind the paper to keep the scratch coat from sliding behind the stucco netting when the paper is installed over studs instead of plywood. It's only useful during the scratch coat. Next you'll need single grade D asphalt saturated felt. In this demonstration, let's start with a slab, some framing, weep screed, and 20-minute building paper. Now let's spray a little water onto the 20-minute building paper. The 20-minute rating is primarily the time it takes for vapor to penetrate through the paper. Now let's apply some drywall and imagine for a moment that it's 120 degrees outside and the AC is keeping the interior at a very cold temperature. Condensation could occur within the stud cavity even if insulation was present. Fortunately, the building paper allows moisture to escape through evaporation. Now, if high minute rating is important to you, there is a Super D paper that has a 60-minute rating. It's an excellent paper to use, but is not necessary to purchase if you're just trying to only pass your inspection. Check with your local building department for details. Now, when you're running paper over plywood, you'll need to run 2 layers of grade D 20-minute paper. Instead of going through the hassle of running it twice, they made it convenient for you and made a roll that's already double paper. So all you have to do is roll it out once. Very convenient. The next thing you'll need to purchase is a roll of 17 gauge 1.5 mesh pre-furred stucco netting. This material is already pre-furred and can be fastened with proper lath staples. The proper staple size for application over studs is 7/8 inch legs and a 1 inch crown. Now, over shear panel, the proper staple size is 1.25 inch legs and 1 inch crown. It's okay to use furring nails if that's what you desire, but the stucco netting is already pre-furred with little kinks in the wire. A roll of stucco netting is 150 feet in length and will do 50 square yards of wall surface area. Now, if you plan on doing any overhead stuff like, let's say for instance, underneath eaves, or if you're in a patio area and you want to do the lid in stucco, then I would highly recommend to use this product. It's known as High Rib. It comes as a 97-inch long piece by 27-inch wide. Now, the reason why I recommend this is because it has 1/4-inch holes which will grab the stucco and keep it up instead of falling in your face. If you tried to use something like stucco netting, it wouldn't hold. So that's why I highly recommend this. The next thing you'll need to purchase is corner aid, whether it be bullnose corner aid or straight corner aid, depending upon whether it matches up to your project. This product also comes as arch aid, so you can put it around an arch. Now, even though wad type furring nails will do the job, personally I would highly recommend getting a pneumatic staple gun, whether you purchase one or just rent one. Makes the job go far easier and faster. Now, you could purchase this product, which is known as paperback stucco netting. If you don't feel that you want to run the line wire, paper, and stucco netting separately, you can purchase this paperback netting and fasten it to the wall as one unit. It sounds easy, but it's not. This product is a lather's and plaster's nightmare. It's harder to cut and it's not as tight on the wall for the plaster to stick. You'll get far better results by doing each item separately. But if convenience is what you're looking for, then by all means purchase this product. Now with all that said, why don't you meet me on one of my jobs and I'll show you how to install it. Hello again. Today we're going to show you the proper steps, procedures, and tools you'll need to install lathing to a typical room addition, like this one. Lathing is the first step you'll need to initiate before you can apply the first coat of plaster to a 3-coat conventional system. A 3-coat conventional system is most commonly used in all western states. If you're located in California, approximately 90% of all structures here are of the 3-coat system. There are other systems used, for instance the EIFS system, that stands for Exterior Installation Finish System, and the 1-coat system. These stucco systems are not commonly used in western areas that do not have extreme weather conditions. They are usually used where conditions are either too hot or too cold because of their insulating features. We won't be discussing either of those today. We'll probably be discussing in a future video. Before I begin installing the lath, I usually like to start by achieving a proper tie-in of papers and wires at each end of the addition. If your framer or contractor did not properly expose the stucco wire and paper, you'll need to take care of this yourself. It is extremely important to expose the existing paper to achieve a sufficient overlap of old paper to new paper. By doing that, we eliminate the risk of moisture intrusion. A good 6-inch overlap is sufficient and standard. The old wire will need to be overlapped with the new wire as well. By doing this, we eliminate a separation crack in the finished stucco. As you can see here, there's not enough wire or paper for a proper overlap. In this case, we'll need to use an electric jackhammer or a chisel and hammer to break the plaster away from the wire. You should try, if at all possible, to go to the next stud over for an even better tie-in and for a place to staple down the wire over the old. Using a sheet of plastic under your work area will minimize time wasted on cleanup. Now that we've finished the demo portion of the lath process, it's now time to start the lath installation. We want to start with the application of the weep screed. Typically, we want to keep the same level of the new screed with the existing screed. You'll need to hold the screed approximately 1 inch down from the corner point of the screed to the bottom wood sill plate or plywood sheeting, whatever may be your case. With it placed down to its proper distance, it should match up evenly with the existing screed. Get someone to help you hold one end of the screed while you nail the other that is close to the old screed securely to the bottom sill, which in this case is behind the plywood. Next, use your level to be sure that the screed is level and check to see if you still got a distance of 1 inch from the corner of the screed to the bottom of the sill. Usually, if the plywood is installed correctly, the bottom of the sill plate is even with the bottom of the plywood. If it hangs below the sill plate, the level will make sure that you're still below the sill 1 inch. When you're absolutely sure the screed is in the correct position, place a nail in one of the holes in the screed and properly secure it to the framing. You'll need to repeat this process all the way around the addition until you reach the other end. When overlapping one screed over another, the minimum overlap is 1 inch. If you need to cut a portion of a 10-foot stick of screed in order to meet a required distance, let me show you an easy way to do your cutting. Before you start cutting, take a measuring tape and measure the distance from a 1 inch overlap of the previous screed all the way over to 1 inch past the corner of the addition. After you've measured where you want to cut your screed, place a mark where the cut will start and cut all the way down to the point. Once you've done that, flip the screed around and start cutting from the other end until you reach the point again. Then bend back and forth at the cut until the two pieces break apart. A good way to cut the end that goes on the corner of the framing is easily done in this fashion. Measure in 1 inch from the end here and cut down to the corner of the screed that hangs below the sill plate. Then cut across this line and pull this piece out. Flip the screed around and visually cut a 45-degree angle cut from the end of the point across. Level the screed again and place the end of the corner cut at the edge of the framing and fasten securely. Coming from the other end, you need to perform the same step but on the opposite side of the screed. Complete your screed installation until you reach the other end of your addition. Like I had mentioned before, cut this portion of the screed out. Cut the bottom portion of the screed out as well. Install the screed to the bottom of the sill plate right to the corner of the framing and bend this edge of the screed slightly down about 45 degrees. Then on the other side, it's the same procedure. Install the screed to the bottom of the sill plate, right to the corner of the framing, and bend this edge of the screed slightly down about 45 degrees. As you can see, it is straight on the bottom, on the top, and comes to a nice point. Now that the screed is installed, the next step is to apply line wire in areas that have wood stud exposed. Visually measure approximately 6 inches from the sill plate line upward and install a nail. Driving it in about halfway. Measure up another 6 inches and install another nail. Do this on both ends. Now that the nails are in, start wrapping the wire around the end nail. Extend the wire around the nail on the opposite end, wrap down to the next, then across to the other. Once done, cut the wire. You can now fully hammer in the nails. Now you need to tighten the wire by taking a nail, pulling down on the wire, and driving it all the way down. Do this to all the loose wires. The line wire acts as backing for the first plaster coat. Without it, when a plaster is applied over the stucco netting, the mortar will go through the wire netting, hit the paper and slide down and back out through the wire. By using the line wire crossways, the mortar doesn't slide past the wire. Plastering over plywood won't give you that problem. Now we're ready to install the paper. But before you start to install paper, I want you to check something regarding the plywood. I want you to pay close attention to the gap between each plywood panel. You should see approximately an 1/8 inch gap here. This gap is a standard requirement to allow for wood expansion. Without it, the plywood could swell and expand from moisture or heat. Moisture can travel down between the paper and the plywood from a possible roof leak, causing the plywood to expand. Heat can also cause plywood to swell and expand. On a sun-exposed wall, the plywood has a tendency to expand and contract at a different rate than plaster. In any case, without a proper gap between the panels, the plywood expands and deflects outward, pushing against the plaster and causing cracks in the stucco finish. Even with the gap between the panels, this phenomena can occur, but at a lesser severity. In this illustration, we'll start with a slab, some framing, and plywood sheathing. In a perfect world, framing is set back approximately 3/8 of an inch to allow the plywood to set flush with the concrete slab. Now let's apply the screed, lath, and stucco system. Unfortunately, most contractors either don't pay attention or just plain ignore this and set the bottom plate and studs flush with the slab, then apply the plywood. This can create a host of issues. This is a perfect opportunity for insects and most importantly termites to find their way into this area and potentially lead to an infestation. With that in mind, it is also possible for a small hand to reach into this area where they might come up against a black widow or other harmful insects. Since the weep screed is set away from the slab, it no longer protects the stucco from damage, even from something as simple as a lawnmower rolling up and hitting the stucco. This can and will cause damage to the stucco. The unfortunate thing that happens to plywood is that it will expand and contract at a different rate than stucco, and when challenged by moisture or heat, it will expand, deflect outward, and push out onto the stucco, causing the stucco to crack. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you the benefits of plywood over stud framing. Using stud framing alone on any structure can collapse during a seismic force. Let's back up and start over. Now, when plywood is used over stud framing, as you can see, it holds the structure together during a seismic force. Cracks in stucco can have many causes, but in most all cases it's usually structural related and not necessarily the fault of the stucco system. If you are a lathing contractor viewing this video and you don't see a 1/8 inch gap, have your customer or contractor sign a waiver disclosing his or her acknowledgement to this problem. By having them sign a waiver may keep you out of court. I've attended arbitrations, depositions, and sat in court defending plastering contractors regarding stucco cracks related to plywood expansion issues. Don't get in trouble for ignoring this problem. This may come around and bite you later when you least expect it. A standard paper used for applying over a wood substrate is a grade D asphalt saturated felt paper. When going over open stud areas, only one paper is recommended. When going over plywood, 2 layers of the same paper is recommended. These papers only hold a 20-minute rating, and with 2, you not only get this number double, but you get a gap between the papers to further slow down the moisture travel. I usually like to start at one end of the addition. I like to cut a 2-foot slice of paper first and set it in place, making sure you extend the paper down to the screed line and over to the stud. Bend the paper into the corner and tack it with your staple tacker. It's easier to tackle a small section of paper rather than wrestle with an entire roll in these tight spaces. Apply another section of paper directly above the other, making sure it has an overlap of 6 inches. Do this procedure until you reach the top. Start at a corner with a complete roll of paper. This paper is a double layer paper all in one. Just roll it out, making sure you extend the paper past the corner 6 inches. When you reach the inside corner, crease the paper here. Roll the paper up to the crease, poke the blade of your utility knife through the paper with the casing of the knife riding against the paper roll. Cut the paper all the way down to the bottom and your cut should be fairly straight. Place the paper into the corner and tack in place. Apply a few staples in various areas to keep the paper from sagging. Next, what you should do is take your yellow crayon and mark where each stud is located. You can tell this by locating the nails in the plywood. Try to make your lines as straight and accurate as possible to ensure that your furring nails or lath staples will be driven into a stud and not into the field of the plywood. If a building inspector locates a staple or nail in the field of the plywood, he may not pass the inspection. They call these shiners and should be removed, and the nail holes in the paper should be caulked over. Now we'll need to install the second section of paper using the same procedures, but making sure that your papers overlap each other a good 6 inches. It would be a good idea to mark this paper with your crayon as well, to be assured that when stapling or nailing these areas, you're staying in line with the underlying stud. Paper using the same procedures as before. We're going to run our paper to the very top of the framing in this case of this project. The contractor plans to run a metal drip edge over the top of the wall, which will shed any moisture over our paper barrier. He should do this installation prior to the application of the stucco color coat, preferably after the lath is completed and before the plaster is applied. When running your paper around window openings, check to make sure that the window flashing is installed correctly. A quick note, and I can't stress this enough, have your window installer stay away from that type of flashing that is a peel and stick. The flashing around this window is not a peel and stick. A peel and stick product is not typically used in this type of application. I'm not saying that it will not work as a window flashing, but if installed incorrectly, it can create a whole bunch of problems. If you plan to use a peel and stick window flashing like this one, do not, I repeat, do not take the plastic or paper covering off of this product until after the lath paper has been installed. Then remove the plastic or paper covering and press down over the lath paper. If the peel and stick product gets stuck to the wood substrate, it will become a complete nightmare to peel up and could get torn. You may possibly need to have the window removed and a new section of peel and stick installed with the plastic or paper attached. There are other proper and more commonly used window flashings for sale at your local mega store that are standard of industry, and they are not a peel and stick product. When installing either of these products, before the window can be installed, a section should be cut to a length which is 12 inches longer than the width or height of the window opening. Make sure it's level with the top of the lower window plate and extends to a length of 6 inches on both sides of the window. Second, install the two sides. Line them up with the edge of the interior portion of the stud on each side of the window opening. These need to extend 6 inches above and below the window opening as well. Now, the window is ready to be installed. Once installed, the top flashing gets installed over the top of the window. When installing flashing for a slider door, extend the flashing approximately 6 inches above the slider opening and 6 inches below the bottom sill plate. Do this on both sides of the opening. Install the slider door, then install flashing on top of the slider, extending it approximately 6 inches on each side of the slider. Take it for granted the window and its flashing was installed correctly. It's now time to run the paper around the window. Cut a length of paper that extends approximately 6 inches on each side of the window. In this case, we're using a single layer of paper only because a single layer is required over open studs. Remember, you only need 2 layers of paper over plywood. Since there is no plywood in this area, a single layer is sufficient. Tack the paper down and trim the paper at the inside corner of the screen. Extend your paper 6 inches past the corner. Make sure that you are overlapping your bottom paper 6 inches and roll the paper over to the window. The same procedure goes for the other side of the window. Once again, since we already have our paper wrapped around the corner from before, we only need to cut the roll at the corner. Tack it down and remember to make sure you mark where your studs are located. Install the rest of the paper on the top, and this side is paper. Now that we've installed the paper correctly, look around for any areas that you may have installed an electrical outlet. If they were installed correctly by your electrician, they should have been protruding out from the framing approximately 3/4 of an inch. What I like to do is run my hand over this area of the paper and create an outline of the edge of the utility outlet. Using my utility knife, I like to cut as accurately as possible around the outlet. Once finished, I like to run some caulking around this area to seal the paper to the outlet. Do this to all your outlets and even around any plumbing cleanouts. Now that that's completed, it's time to install the stucco netting. Extend your wire to the end of one side of your addition and nail or staple the wire to the existing stud. Your staple should be no more than 6 inches apart, or better known as 6" on center. Less of a distance is okay, but more than 6 inches will not pass industry standards. Once you've stapled this area, take your hammer and make a crease in the wire at the corner. Staple on both sides of the corner. Remember not to staple further than 6" on center. Stretch the wire to the corner of the addition and staple at the corner. Make sure the bottom of the wire is level at the bottom of the paper and in the inside of the screed. Locate the stud area where you marked with your yellow crayon and staple 6" on center up each stud. When this is done, staple every 6" on center across the screed area, making sure you are driving each staple into the bottom sill plate. You'll want to be as precise as possible as not to have any shiners exposed inside. Remember, shiners are staple legs or nails that protrude into the field of the plywood and not into a stud. All of the same principles used at the bottom layer of the netting applies to the second layer and third layer of the netting. We need to continue running our staple 6" on center up every stud. When going around windows or doors, you will need to staple 6" on center around them as well. Okay, that's it. All that's left now is to install the corner aid. Measure from the top of the wall corner down to the corner edge of the weep screed and cut the corner aid accordingly. Install a nail into a hole or slot of the corner aid wire assembly on one side, making sure you hold the aid out approximately 3/4 of an inch and not driving the nail more than halfway down. Do the same on the other side, hold it out 3/4 of an inch and not drive the nail more than halfway down. Now go to the bottom and line up the end of the aid with the corner of the bottom screed. Install nails on each side of the corner aid as described below. Now that we have the top and bottom secure without disturbing the straightness of the aid, nail into slots or holes to secure the aid to the wall on both sides in the center. The proper requirement distance for these nails is 18" on center. And that's it. We've completed the lathing and now we're ready to have it inspected by our local building official. In most cases, you will need to install your insulation and drywall prior to getting inspection. The building inspectors want to make sure all pounding of nails on the interior is completed before commencing the stucco process. Good luck, and we'll see you when we start the scratch coat. To recap what we mentioned earlier, be sure to consult your local building official for up-to-date specs and requirements for the region you are located in. Take precise measurements of your project and remember, all wall surface areas are measured by the square yard. The items to purchase starts with the weep screed. You will need to purchase line wire if you have any open stud areas. When purchasing your building paper, purchase at least a 20-minute rated grade D asphalt saturated felt paper, or you can purchase a Super D paper with a 60-minute rating. Remember, over plywood, it is required to install 2 layers of the 20-minute paper. Next, you'll need a roll of preferred stucco netting, which will do approximately 50 square yards. If you're going to use a pneumatic staple gun to fasten the wire to the wall, you will need to use staples that are a 1-inch crown with 7/8-inch legs when going over open stud areas. Over plywood, you will need staples with a 1-inch crown and 1 1/4-inch legs. If you plan to do any soffit areas, you should purchase high rib material. The proper fastening staple should be 1-inch crown and 1 1/4-inch legs. It's highly recommended to expose the existing wire and paper. You will need to break back the stucco approximately 6 inches. Without a proper overlap of the paper, you will get a moisture leak, and without the proper overlap of the wires, you will get a separation crack in the stucco finish. Match your new weep screed up to the existing. Take a level to the screed and fasten securely. Now, run the first layer of paper. Mark the stud areas to ensure embedment into the stud areas. Remember, you don't want any staple shiners to be exposed. Run your second layer of paper and mark it as well. Now run the third and final layer of the paper, making sure that all overlaps are approximately 6 inches. When cutting the paper around any outlet, cut as precise as you can. Caulk this area around the outlet to seal the paper to the outlet. Now run your first layer of stucco netting, making sure you staple 6-inch on center up every stud and across the bottom. Install the second layer of wire, overlapping the previous about 1 1/2 mesh. Staple 6-inch on center up every stud. Install the third layer of wire, and don't forget to staple 6-inch on center up every stud across the top and around any windows or doors. Install the corner aid and nail approximately 18-inch on center. Hi, I'm Ed Dare. I'm going to be your host for the next hour, showing you my personal, whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer, it will be an enjoyable experience learning how everything comes together. Some of the tips and tricks I show you in this video will even benefit the most professional seasoned. The process used in this video for installing lath and stucco on a room addition are also applicable on a The next thing you'll need is line wire. Line wire comes in a roll known as okay. What? What?
What a dope. What a maroon.
And that's it.